What's up guys, I'm Jesse from Mold the Maker, and today we are building our homemade DIY squat rack. This episode and project is sponsored by ESAB. It is the welder I use. I use a Rebel 215 multi-process unit, but they also have just a MIG welder that is a 110, which is perfect for garage shops or like mine, or a just DIY centered approach to welding. So if you're new, make sure you go check out their website. Let's get into the build. So I already posted some videos of the build on my Instagram, and I've already gotten some suggestions. So a caveat before we even start is that I'm new to welding. Some of the welds are not pretty, and they are pretty ugly. And I did use my gloves on my drill press. Now, I never use gloves on my table saw. I never use gloves on my joiner because you don't want to get caught and then pulled your hand in. I didn't really think about that when it comes to the drill press. I was just thinking about not getting shards of metal in my hand. And so maybe I shouldn't have used the gloves there, but you know, you live and learn. So let's get into the build. Now, real quick, what kind of metal am I using? I am using 11 gauge steel, which is compared to every other, whether you look at Rogue or Titan Fitness or a bunch of those really big companies, they all use 11 gauge steel. So we're using the exact same steel that they're using. We are using 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch tubing. Some racks have 2.5 inch, some have 2, some have 3. We went with 2.5 inch because it saved us a little bit of money compared to the 3 inch. To start the build, I cut a jig. Now this jig will help me. It's basically a fence where I can mark off exactly and clamp to my drill press, so that way I can throw up a piece and they're all going to be completely centered and perfect every single time. It saved me a ton of time instead of trying to measure and basically line up every single time. This just made the process way simple and way easy. So for this build, we only used 3 tools: my drill press, my chop saw, and also my welder. That's it. It was pretty simple to do and pretty easy. So I went through and cut all the pieces to length, and then I took them over to the drill press and used 2 different bits. The first drill bit was a 1-inch bit. Now this is just a metal bit. It worked really well, and the only problem we had was we tested it with some of the rack supports. They call it, a lot of people call them J hooks, or they're just to rack the barbell. Now those J hooks, it didn't fit inside the 1 inch, even though they were 1 inch, they were so snug. So we took a step down bit and got that last little 1/8 inch, which makes it really easy to go in and out, but still really secure. So I went through and marked all my pieces. For the 4 main pieces that will be the stand up part, where we'll have the holes in it so you can put the J hooks, so you can move them up and down, whether you're bench pressing or you're squatting, anything like that. We use those first, so we marked all those and started cutting the holes. Drilling the holes out, we had over 150 holes if you count both sides of each piece of metal, which is just insane. It took a long time to drill out. That was probably the most tedious part, but it really wasn't that hard. My Delta drill press is a beast, so it was really simple to go through, drill each hole from the top, and just leave it in place, and then cut the bottom and keep moving. Now for the supports, we have a flat piece that I'll be welding to each support arm between the 4 pillars that go up. Now those support arms, I'm only drilling out with 3/4 inch bit, because that 3/4 inch bit, you don't need, it's all gonna be bolted together, and you don't need giant bolts that are 1 inch thick. First of all, they're hard to, you can't buy them at Home Depot. The largest they have is 3/4. So why not just use that? They're still huge bolts. So that's what we ended up going with. I used some oil on my drill bit constantly just to make sure that it didn't overheat. I did see that online on my Instagram posts, someone said we could basically dial in with our drill press the RPMs, and that could help. And so that's one thing I didn't do, so I'll be checking into that next time. After all the holes were drilled out on the drill press, 150 of them, on the flat pieces that we drilled, those will be welded to the brackets that will help bolt everything together to shore up the entire squat rack. So we started with welding those onto the small 17-inch brackets first. I'm using 11 gauge steel, and we have some flat bar 11 gauge steel as well, and I welded that onto the ends of the 17-inch support beams. And those I tack welded on the corners and then welded the sides. Now, a suggestion that I heard from some more experienced welders was that you should actually tack weld on the flat parts just a small bit so it doesn't move, and then round the corners because it's a stronger weld. So that's something else I will be doing next time I weld. Welding is a learning process. It's something that I'm continuously trying to get better at. Some of my welds look pretty good. Some of them did not look so good. But I am continuously trying to get better and better as we go along this project. So since this isn't a full rack you'd be squatting or benching inside the 4 big upright beams. This is going to be a half rack, so I'll be racking on the front end, which means that the balance of the weight could tip over the whole rack if you don't have supports. So I cut some supports that will be angled out. They come out over a foot, just over a foot, about 14 inches, and then they angled to the ground on both sides. Those will be bolted to the support beam through the big upright beams, and those will be secured with 3/4 inch bolts. So the side supports are 17 inches and I have 4 of those. I also have some supports on the back. The support on the back is 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch, just like the upright post. And it spans the top of the post on the back side. And then we also have one that is identical to that on the bottom. So on the front side, I have a pull-up bar. I have a 1-inch tubing. I welded the 11 gauge flat brackets to that 1-inch tubing. After everything was welded up, I wanted to make sure everything fit properly before I start painting, so we did a dry fit. After I knew everything was ready to go, it was time to put up all my tarps in my shop and paint. So for the paint, we are using a green and black. They are high gloss, made for metal paint, and we just use some spray cans. I used 4 green spray cans and only 2 black. And then for the pull-up bar, we used a truck bed liner. Now I wanted to use a truck bed liner because it has a better texture, so it's not so slippery, and it ends up working out really, really well. At the very end, I went through and added a high gloss finish as well, and that just gave it a nice sheen, but it also protects the paint so it doesn't get scratched, because this eventually will get beat up as we move weights, rack things, pull attachments in and out. It will get scratched, but we want it to last as long as possible. After we let that sit for about 24 hours, it was time to assemble. So for assembly, we're using a 3/4 inch bolt, a washer, another washer, a locking washer, and the nut. This works really well, very simple to throw all in, tighten it up, and that's it. We went through and we made sure that we bolted it all together, not tight, because you don't want to over tighten one spot and then not have it square. So we just bolted it together so it was all supported. Then we went back through and tightened everything. Now we wanted to make sure that it could actually do pull-ups on it and it didn't break off from the welds, and successfully 215 pounds, it did really well. This was a really fun project. Even though my welds are ugly on some of them, it was a good project to get started on. And the good thing is that none of the weight is really dependent on my welds, right? So the supports are all together and that's what's dependent, but really the main part of it is going to be on those J hooks on that front panel, which is just through the metal. So I'm not really worried about anything. I think structurally it's really good. It's just not the prettiest on some of them, but I'm very happy with the cost. It's 1/3 the cost of the retailer, and that is totally worth it. So from $500 compared to $1,500, you know, I can spend that $1,000 if I wanted to on weights and other things to really outfit my gym and not waste it on just the rack itself. Thanks for watching, guys. This was a really fun project. It was nice not having to spend so much money, but also be able to dive back into welding, which I haven't done in about 1.5 years. So that was also fun. Make sure that you stay tuned. We have some other gym projects that we're going to be working on, including some welding, some dumbbell and kettlebell stands, along with other attachments for the squat rack we just built. So make sure you follow us on Mold the Maker on Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. See you next time.